Hi everyone, welcome to the community classroom. This is Dr. Tracey McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator, and we are going to address a couple of issues. The first one is the unauthorized practice of law on YouTube and social media. There are a number of individuals on the internet that are essentially practicing law without a license, and we're going to talk about the crime of practicing law without a license. And there are a number of people who are being victimized by these individuals, people who want to believe that a variety of individuals have some sort of inside scoop on the law that attorneys don't have. And so many people are falling prey to some of these predatory dynamics. And so we're going to talk about the definition of the unauthorized practice of law. We're going to talk about jurisdiction, and we're going to look at a couple of examples of some states and what they have to say about the unauthorized practice of law. We are also going to take a look at the amount of YouTube activity that is going on in response to a number of deceptions regarding Indian status. And so we're going to look at some of that so that you can just see how much there is out there, and it is under that umbrella of unauthorized practice of law because there are certain individuals that are putting it out there that people need to fill out certain forms, and that's going to give them Indian identity, indigenous identity, Aboriginal identity, and we are going to put those rumors to rest today. Now, of course, some individuals may have just taken up this charge because they innocently believed that this is the way to become an Indian or to have oneself identified under the status of an Aboriginal person, an Indigenous person, a Native person, an Indian person. And so we are going to address all of that because a number of people perhaps have just been vulnerable to some individuals or groups of individuals that have manipulated the situation. So they may have just innocently believed this and then spread that information to others. And we are going to wrap things up with a final word regarding hero worship and idolizing people on the computer. Let's quickly go over the dictionary definition of the crime of the unauthorized practice of law. Now, the laws actually vary from state to state, and so you need to check on a particular state to see exactly what their statutes say, but this is a general overview so that you get an idea of what it looks like if you are perhaps at risk for engaging in the behavior or if you are a recipient of any of these activities. And so the first thing is preparing legal documents in order to secure rights for a particular person. Another big issue, and it's probably one of the bigger ones, is expressing legal opinions or preparing legal opinions in writing for someone to secure legal rights. And this is basically giving legal advice, and this is the big issue with the unauthorized practice of law. The other one is representing someone in a judicial or quasi-judicial situation. Now, there are some situations where a person can have a lay person as an assistant or some sort of representative. These are rare instances, but they would not generally be in judicial proceedings. Another thing to be mindful of is preparing documents that will be filed with any court. Now, of course, a person can represent themselves and they can file many things. This is talking about someone else doing this on behalf of another person. And so the last thing to be mindful of is trying to negotiate legal rights or responsibilities for another person. And here you can see some examples of statements from different court systems. And so you can see an example of New York, and then you can see an example of what California says about the unauthorized practice of law. And each state is going to handle those infractions differently. New York State specifically, their situations are handled by the district attorney's office in whatever local area the person is practicing unlawfully in. And as you can see here, the Mississippi Bar has a very lengthy statement regarding the unauthorized practice of law, and you can see their statute here. Now, if someone feels that they have been victimized by someone practicing law unlawfully on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere on the internet, they might want to consider contacting their state Supreme Court, because that's the entity that would have the guidance regarding what a person would need to do to address that issue. Now, it's important to note that in the age of the internet, you have multiple jurisdictions going on when someone is practicing law and it's unauthorized. And so you have the jurisdiction that the person is in who's offering this legal service, and then you have the jurisdiction that the person is in that is receiving this service. And of course, the problem is that when someone provides unauthorized legal advice or services online, they open themselves up, because anyone could receive that quote unquote advice or that legal service anywhere in the world. And so they open themselves up to be under the jurisdiction of whatever place the person is in who experience themselves as receiving the legal service. And so in other words, it could be a YouTuber or someone on Facebook or Instagram or just their own blog, and that person might be in Arkansas, for instance. But the person who received the advice, the legal service, let's say they live in Connecticut. And so you've got two different jurisdictional dynamics going on there. People are also encouraged to seek out actual legal advice regarding this issue of status and who is an Indian and who is not. And you can see here the Department of Justice has information regarding this. And so basically, just as a general rule, an Indian is someone who has some degree, and it varies from tribe or nation to nation, but that has some degree of Indian blood, and they are actually recognized as an Indian by a particular tribe that's in the United States. So there's no particular single federal, national, or tribal criteria that a person has to have in order to establish that identity as an Indian. And this is in large part because each tribal nation has different criteria for understanding who belongs in their collective. And so there are also issues regarding the ethnicity of Indian versus the legal definition or idea of an Indian. And so a person can be ethnically an Indian, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to receive protections and services from the United States, because those protections and services are generally related to what are called recognized tribes. But again, if someone has questions, you can contact Indian Affairs, you can contact the Office of Tribal Justice, and so there is information provided there for you to do that, and you can contact them directly, and that way you can take the mystery out of it. Sometimes on YouTube people make things a little too mysterious, and some of that is to get views and to get people coming back, so they think that they are offering them something special, some special knowledge about being an Indian that no one else has. In some instances that might be the case, but in terms of this basic information regarding status, the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Offices of Tribal Justice can answer a large number of questions. Now, a number of people repeatedly make comments demanding to know how to change one's Indian status or indigenous status. And there is this belief that there's some huge secret that attorneys and educators and everyone, that these people are keeping this secret and stopping people from changing their status or realizing their Indian identity. And so there's a lot of focus and a lot of questions regarding this standard form 181, and we're going to put this issue to rest once and for all. And so you'll be able to see, we'll just go through a few screens, you'll be able to see just how much there is out there with people involved in this standard form 181. If you just type in standard form 181 on YouTube, you're going to see a plethora of entries, and so you'll get to see a listing of some of those as we go through the next screens. And as you can see here, there are people who are offering all sorts of services to help people with this alleged status correction process. People are offering packets, they are selling services, and even when someone says to people on the internet that this form is not the appropriate form, people don't believe it and get very upset about it, and again believe that people are keeping some secret or just trying to keep them from changing their status. Again, you can see there are large numbers of people who are sending in these forms, and they have all sorts of questions about the forms and what's going to happen with the forms. And so there's a lot of stuff out there. You have even people who are filling out these forms for their entire family, so even filling out the forms for the children. And this form has basically developed a cult following. So people are videotaping their process of filling out the form. They are videotaping the response of the federal employees when they attempted to get the form, what happened when they turned in the form. And so there's just a lot going on out there with this particular form. And also there are a number of people who have also incorporated the Social Security office in this whole dynamic with the application for a Social Security card. And then you have individuals who are focusing on executive orders related to the standard form 181. And so there's a lot of stuff going on with this whole process. And again, a part of it is because people are being led to believe that there is some mystery surrounding this, and that certain people have, the inside track, and they're going to give them that information. And so, again, we are going to lay this to rest. And you can see individuals are even sending forms to the Social Security Administration of International Affairs. So again, there's a lot going on here with people believing that they need to fill out this form in order to change their essential identity. And a lot of this is really simply related to individuals just being misinformed, and in some situations actually being misled. And again, you can see there is another offering of this this package, this service related to packages for this standard form 181. Just so you know, there is no real mystery regarding most government forms. These are standard forms, and this is just a listing of a number of standard forms. But these standard forms are related to the federal government services. And so you have standard form 15, and it's related to if you're applying for a veteran's preference in a job application. You also have standard form 256, and that's a self-identification of disability. And then you have some other military records and things like that for prior service and prior federal service, notification of a personnel action. And so many of these are related to the Office of Personnel Management, and they are only related to individuals that actually fall under these categories. And so these are not forms for just any person to fill out. And so if a person isn't a veteran, for instance, they would not be filling out the standard form 15. The same thing applies with standard form 181, and we're going to look at standard form 181 so that you can see who is supposed to be filling out standard form 181 and who is not supposed to be filling it out. So here is standard form 181, and so let's just address this form once and for all. This form is simply a form for the United States Office of Personnel Management for them to collect data on basically equal opportunity. And so they are simply compiling data primarily for their employees. And so they are looking to get this information, and it actually says this form is for use by current federal employees only. And even though that admonition is there, individuals persist in filling out this form when they are not employees of the federal government. And you can note that if you are a federal employee, you don't have to fill out this form. It's completely voluntary, but if you want to fill it out, you can fill it out. And then you can, if you are a federal employee, you can identify yourself. So this will let them know how many Hispanic or Latino people are working for the federal government. There's also a listing of the racial categories down below, and it gives you the definition of the categories, and these definitions are substantially similar to the definitions that are on the census forms, and that might be why so many people believe that this form has significance for everyday average people walking around. But again, this is not a form for everyone. This is really a form for federal employees. And so if someone shows up at a federal office requesting this form, the employees there are going to be puzzled because an individual just coming off the street to fill out this form is highly unusual. And so they would not be expecting anyone to do it, particularly since the person's not working there. And if they work there, they would have already been provided this form when they started working. Now again, no one is going to stop anyone from filling out this form and sending it in. However, this form really serves no purpose for anyone who is not a current federal employee. And there are also large numbers of people who believe that simply filling out an application for a Social Security card is going to change their status from generally African American to Indian. This, however, does not do this. This really is simply an application for a Social Security card. And so if someone's already had a Social Security card, this would be a replacement Social Security card. Otherwise, this form in and of itself does not make anyone an Indian. It does not provide any sorts of special benefits or services from the federal government based upon an Indian identity related to a Social Security card. It simply does not do that. In fact, Social Security is really a sort of a bank account, a retirement account for individuals throughout the country, and it's also a unique identifier for people in terms of employment and things like that and receiving other types of services. But it is not, this form does not give anyone an automatic Indian status simply because they write in that they are an American Indian. Again, no one can stop anyone from filling out the form, but if a person is not looking to get a new Social Security card, they might save their time in terms of filling out this form. So if someone's selling packets with, applications for Social Security cards, you might want to contact the Social Security Administration again and ask them directly, what does this form do for a person? And that might help to clarify any confusion. And just remember, in order to have Indian status, you really individually have to trace your heritage back to a specific Indian tribe. There is no other special formula. Simply having brown skin or copper skin is not going to automatically make someone classified as an Indian. And it doesn't matter how much research a person does about the culture of the United States or America or the history of America. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is that heritage, trust and believe. And so actually a lot of time that people are spending on YouTube, they could use that time to spend on trying to track down all of their ancestors to see if they belong to a particular tribe. And you might find that your ancestors belong to multiple tribes, but also want to caution people about this idea that every single brown person in America is from an Indian tribe, or that they have no African heritage, or they have no European heritage. That is simply not the case. And so that people don't get disappointed and really upset when they discover that perhaps they did have an ancestor who was enslaved, or they did have an ancestor who was from Europe and who was an indentured servant. People need to keep their minds open and not just jump on all of these bandwagons that are rolling around now. And perhaps most important out of this discussion is that many people need to be cautious about all of this hero worship that is going on in social media. And of course it goes on in regular life, because people place people on pedestals in terms of celebrity status. However, in terms of social media and the internet and people putting people on pedestals and worshiping them like heroes and like they are gods, little demigods, people need to be very careful about that. That's not a healthy way to operate in the world, and it sets people up for being manipulated because there are lots and lots of narcissists and psychopaths and all sorts of interesting people out there. And so just be cautious about that type of thing. And in terms of this ancestry dynamic, spend some time trying to track down your own ancestors and creating that legacy for your family. And remember, this series was started in response to the work of Yvette Carnell and some of the work that Seren was doing, and also Dane Calloway. And so these series were initially started in response to some of that work and the issue of reparations. And so this was really started to get people on the track to start looking at the issue of reparations more concretely, because people were just sort of talking about it and being very frustrated. And so tracing that heritage is the first step in determining one's eligibility for reparations. And we are talking about slave trade reparations, because Indian reparations is a different type of reparative justice. There are overlaps, but this was started initially in relation to those who identify themselves as African American and those who see themselves as descendants of American chattel slavery. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.